Members and the public are advised that proceedings of this meeting, other than any confidential matters, is being recorded and made publicly available on the council website, and persons attending the meeting should refrain from making any defamatory statements.
Thank you. Councillors, are there any apologies?
Councillor Kingham.
Councillor Kingham. Councillor Fry.
Councillor Capel.
And Councillor Capel. Do I have a mover and a second to accept that?
I'll do that.
Leslie, Councillor Reynolds. All four?
Aye.
Against carried. Question on confirmation of minutes of the July 2020 ordinary meeting of the Macquarie County Council, held on 31st July. Do I have a mover and a second for that, please? Councillor Kimmin. Councillor Ring. All four? Against? Councillors, minutes of September 2020 extraordinary meeting of Macquarie County Council on 11 September 2020. Can I have a mover and a second, please? Councillor Reynolds, Councillor Kimmin, all four?
Aye.
Yes, carried. Thank you very much. Have we got any disclosure of interest, Mr. General Manager?
No, Mr. Chairman, no.
I'll be moving a second for that. Councillor Kimmin, Councillor Leslie, all four? Yes, carried. No presentations. The Chairman's report is a confidential matter.
Do you want to deal with that now or later?
I'll deal with that later. We want to go into confidential.
Well, I'll move that bit first till.
Suspension standard orders.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All four? Thank you. Okay, gentlemen. Item 1, statement of investments as of September 30, 2020. We have a recommendation at the bottom there. Can I remove the second, councillors? Councillor Reynolds, Councillor McKibben. Any questions? Councillor Reynolds.
A question that's been plaguing me for a while.
Yes.
I see we have a third bank account. So we see the two investments. How much money is in there? I assume it's a check account or something like that. How much money actually is in there, and should we be showing that on a monthly basis?
Mr. General Manager.
Mr. Chairman, so yes, there is another bank account, which is the operating account, and at any moment in time it can have between 5,000 and 100,000. That is actually the account where the on-notice funds get moved to. I can provide that information, but it's not technically part of this report because it's not actually available money, it's actually committed. So I can make an extra note if the council wishes.
Yeah, that's right. I'd just like to know how much we've got.
Yeah.
This is a third, so rather than 1.6 million, we've got 1.65 million, whatever, an actual cash.
Can I just ask the mover and seconder on that motion, if we just add an extra point to have that clarified at future meetings, would you be happy with that? Yep. Okay, all four? It's carried. Okay, anything, Councillor Rachel, anything else, was it? Just that? Anyone else have their hand up?
Oh, sorry.
Yep.
No, I think we'll discuss it later. But as I think we need to look at, and we'll probably do it in the workshop, as to what a reasonable level of reserve is. I remember it's noted there, but whether we can actually, because of the way the season is and everything, whether we might utilise some of those funds to accelerate a few things, because the last few years have been drought. This year is obviously good. There's no excuses for people virtually not spraying, etc. So we can up the ante, and if we need to bring in questionable whether we need to bring in a few extra resources, it might be the time to think about doing it. But I'll leave that for the further discussion at the workshop, and I will be guided by the General Manager and Chief Weeds Officer as might be most appropriate.
You'll raise that at that time?
I will. If I don't, I'm sure someone will remember.
Councillor Reynolds, sorry. Member Reynolds, sorry.
I was just going to ask, have all the councils now paid to get to 1.6? We've gone up to 1.2 2 years ago, 1.4 now, or just over 1.4 now, or 1.6. So is this all councils paying? And why? Probably a follow on from Member McKibben's comments. We seem to be building funds at a higher rate, but it's probably more have the councils paid.
General Manager?
The answer to that question is yes, they have, very promptly.
Thank you.
That's it? You happy with that? Any other questions, members? No? Recommendation there, all four?
Aye.
Against carried, thank you. Item 2, financial reserves annual review. We have a recommendation on the bottom of page 2. Can either move and second council members?
Happy to move.
Happy move, councillor Wren, councillor Leslie, you happy to second?
See that.
Okay, councillors, any discussion?
No.
No?
No,
I'll take it as a
I
question.
understand what the point of the reserves is, but I suppose it has some implications for the issue I raised in the previous issue moving forward. And so that'll have to come up in the workshop.
Jean, did you want to?
Mr. Chairman, my preference would be to discuss it in the workshop.
In the workshop?
Yeah, I think I think it's all tied up, so I'll have to discuss it there.
You happy with that?
Yeah.
No other questions, okay? We have a recommendation there, all four?
Aye.
Against carried, thank you. Item 3, pecuniary interest returns for 2020. Recommendation there, can I move and second?
So moved.
Councillor Reynolds, Councillor McKibben. Any questions, commentary? Mr. Jean, did you? Sorry, member
No, I was
Reynolds?
just going to ask, where are they tabled to, as in what information is publicly available and what information is?
Well, far less is available than with our constituent councils, and that's something we basically voted on previously, wasn't it?
Because I can't find anything on the website, so that's.
No, and that was the reason.
Mr. Chairman, as per the previous council deliberation, we don't put them on the website. We maintain them in a folder at the office. We make them available to any person who comes in and identifies themselves and asks. And in relation to the address, more than anything is the name and address or the personal aspect of submissions by the staff members who are designated. We don't, because of our enforcement position, we don't want people to know where they live, sort of thing, even if they've worked it out already. And so that is the bit that's plotted out.
Yeah.
Member McKibben?
Mr. Chairman, I think recommended there's an excellent paper by the General Manager on this, and why we shouldn't, and the reasoning, and that's where we got to, and I think it was, as I think stated at the time, it's a very sensible position, and we should preserve that position, especially for our key staff.
Mr. Jan, one thing I will ask, have we got them here at the moment that we say they've been tabled, to have them, if someone was here, we need to have them.
Mr. Chairman, they ought to have been here in a folder, but we forgot to bring them along.
Okay.
Um,
They need to give us notice.
But when you have the report come before council, they need to be with the general manager. If there's someone in the gallery, they can look at it after the meeting. So if we can make sure on the future ones,
Yes.
please. Members, any other questions? No? All four?
Aye.
Again,
Aye.
against carried, thank you. Item 4, County Council meeting schedule for 2020. We have a recommendation there, can I have a move and seconder? Councillor Gibbon, Councillor Wren, is that, yeah? Any, member Gibbon?
Look, I have sent and I did mention this, I have sent an email to, was the Chairman of New South Wales Speakers Council, Reg Gibbs, to see if he would like to attend the 13th of November meeting. Either to present or to just sit and hear our proceedings and understand what we do. What's wrong, Bruce?
That's, well, good, good. I thought you were kidding.
If the other man, he doesn't really have to come in, that's.
He may not respond, he may not come, but I have sent an invitation, and I think he was quite, well, whereas you speak, I think he quite liked our papers. Maybe you'd like to speak on that, because I've raised it. Did he like the paper we sent through?
I assume so.
And you spoke to him about it, I think.
So, yeah.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I apologize.
No, you're right.
So, yeah, I assume he did, but whether he attends or he can watch our proceedings anyway, because they're all up on YouTube, so.
Yeah, I believe he has a better understanding of how Upper Macquarie County Council's run down due to a couple of councillors and my input to a fellow councillor up at Orange, so thank you. But no other.
Well, we should, I think it's that the opportunity's out there, so we've got the opportunity. Whether he, let's hope he accepts, because I think if you put from a public relations, you'd be happy
Member Reynolds, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Two matters. One I did bring up a number of months ago before COVID, just as COVID hit, was the potential that we actually move some of the meetings to our other constituent councils. We've come to Bathurst and we've been here several times, so there may be an opportunity, particularly next calendar year, to maybe move around. I'm not saying every meeting, but as in maybe at least the opportunity of each constituent council to maybe hold one meeting a year or every second year. Given that we are based here in Bathurst, but also ask, and I assume the General Manager is probably getting to it, to actually get us some dates for next calendar year as soon as possible, so that we can start.
If the movement sector would be happy,
Yes. I'm happy, once we look at the dates for next year, that we might assign certain of those dates to be held at our constituent councils.
for what
I'm sure from Oberon, we'd be certainly happy for that. And I mean, let's go, or not?
Yeah, why not?
I actually quite like coming here. It's easy to get here, but seriously to get, and Oberon's not a problem, but really to go to Blading is quite a trek, I think. If that's the wish of the council, yes, but you know, I think this is quite nice. And just get coming here. or alternatively, keep the old Evans, in Lee Street. I mean, that's. But
what I was also indicating, or I didn't indicate, but my thought was to try and maybe invite some members of the community and also council, etc., to come along. The constituent council, as in maybe, as I said, once every second year, but to do two each year, but to actually engage a little bit more with local community members and do an invitation to New South Wales farmers, etc., to come along and either have a post meeting or a pre-meeting or some sort of forum or something with the community to hear issues.
yeah, that's a valid point. But I think you also must remember that the council elections will be in September next year, and I would advise that you just leave that decision to the new body.
Still got 12 months.
Well, we're not.
If I could, Chair, I'd agree with Member Reynolds. I think we should get out and actually be a bit more present in the communities and more approachable.
Thank you, Councillor Ring. Councillor Kim.
I support Councillor Reynolds. I don't think we're suggesting that every meeting gets assigned. But I'm saying, I don't know whether we do try and take next year for one each, and then we might leave it a year or whatever. But I do think I agree with Councillor Reynolds and I agree with Councillor Ring. I think it's good to be seen, to be out there and to be inviting councillors, inviting New South Wales farmers representatives from that area, and to be seen out there and getting to know the community and the community getting to know us. I think that's better, as long as it's not too much of an administrative burden for the General Manager and the FD.
Well, members, if the movement second are happy, what I suggest that we ask the General Manager to write to constituent councils saying a suggestion has been raised to get the thought of those councils about that. I think I've got to say personally is the way this group of members has worked and got their councils on board and we're getting a better view in the community, it might be a way to take another step to invite the community, which we clearly don't get here at the moment, but we might be able to get in the future. So would members be happy that I ask the General Manager to send a letter an email to the other constituent councils with the suggestion maybe once a year we would attend your council area for a Great County Council meeting and get the feedback so this council can make a decision. Would everyone be happy with that?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
So I have expressed a non-pecuniary interest in that I'm about 50 kilometres from Oberon, 50 kilometres from Blaney, 50 kilometres from Bathurst, so that really I can go anyway. The only one that's further is Lithgow.
Mr. General Manager.
Isn't that right? 240 kilometres?
So members, if you're happy with that, well, the mover and the second are happy, but I'll just put that extra point in there, but we'll ask the general manager to do it through the proper channels to speak to the constituent councils about this in the future. Not setting any dates yet, but talking about in the future. Mr. GM?
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to add a relevant point. I'm currently working on a draft schedule for next year, and I was planning on circulating it to members very shortly, but formally doing it at the November meeting. At this stage, we need to have a minimum of 6 meetings. That's to do our business that we do, and if we choose to, we can actually do them every second month. But 3 of them need to be early in the month, and 3 of them need to be late in the month to meet those deadlines.
Yes.
And that's apart from the workshop side of things and an election.
Yep. So, Mr. Chairman, if you add that item 4, and yeah, I'll allow you to put, if every other member is happy, you'll just put the wording onto that to item 4 that the general manager will look into future meetings. Member McKinnon?
But it's more than likely that the next 2 meetings are going to be here, isn't it? And depending on what the COVID status is, and I see that, I'm not sure what happened today, but certainly there was a bit of an eruption yesterday in Sydney. I mean, we could start this year with Bathurst, but for the COVID restrictions, but because I know a number of councils still having obviously Zoom meetings because of the number of public that might come. But anyway, that's a consideration, but the COVID might prevent that.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, you may know more, but I understand that Bathurst isn't using this chamber for members of the public at the present time.
Yes, we're not.
Yeah. So, you're right.
Whereas, Mr. Chair, Blaney, if you wanted to hold a meeting there, we have oodles of room that we could have a large number of members of the public and meet the COVID requirements. So, again, I'm not speaking on behalf of my general manager or mayor, but
I understand that.
an opportunity. We have a big area that we can use.
Look, every
I
day,
think it have a new fitness centre. That's probably.
okay, councillors,
Sorry,
sorry,
for your Bathurst meetings, do you open that?
we opened that up, yes.
So,
Yep.
I can't where people stand.
Yeah, we opened that up. If there's no other comments, questions, members, there's a recommendation there, all 4.
So,
Yep.
isn't the annual chairman's function, the second part of this, we've got to consider, that's not a different item, is it?
Mr. Chairman, that's recommendation 1, and it is part of this particular.
Yeah, it's part of this thing, so are we just accepting recommendation 1 at this time?
Well, it's in the recommendation, I was saying it's in the recommendations, and I was adding item 4 to be this new one.
Oh, okay, fine. Well, I'm happy for it to be 4, I just would like to talk to the chairman's end-of-year function.
So we won't go to vote then.
Not yet.
You want to talk to it now?
Discuss that. I looked at the paper on this, and obviously I think we need all members' views on this. My view is if the government is actually allowing things like school forms and other functions to get back to a relatively normal situation, are we being too risk averse in not having a function that would probably have, I don't know, what was the number last year, 30 people?
30 or so.
30 people. I do realise that we have, and I know that the general manager advises that we have some older people, but there has been no incidents of COVID in this area. As I understand it, all the attendees to this function would be coming from the Central West. There would be none coming from hotspots in Sydney or anywhere near hotspots in Sydney. We'd ensure the catering would be done here. And regional New South Wales has been relatively free of COVID for, I said 3 months, would I be wrong?
Yeah,
There was someone at Parks, that was it.
That was a non,
That was a non-positive, what is it?
false positive.
False positive. And I know the consequence is high or severe, but on the basis of the evidence, the likelihood of probability is very low. The benefits I see of a chairman's function every year, as it allows the members to actually get together with the staff to meet them, It's, I think, good for both the members and the staff to have an ability to communicate, the staff to know that they're supported by the councillors, and I think it's really one of the only opportunities we get to do that and to interrelate, and for us to show our appreciation of the staff's efforts in having turned this organisation around and to continue to getting the job done. I think one of the great things is we've had staff stability within this organisation, which have been making for a number of years. So my preferred position at this stage is I think we should hold it, albeit it may, with appropriate restrictions in place. For those reasons, if there had been a number of COVID cases in Bathurst, Orange, Blading and O'Brien, my position would be completely different. And if we were in Liverpool or South West Sydney, obviously my position would be completely different. I just think that the likelihood is very, very, very low. But I defer to other members' views. I think it should be discussed between us.
I'll make one comment. When I started this point, I said there's a recommendation, there was a mover and a seconder, and a mover and a seconder accepted that the only amendment that was put to it was item 4. So the mover and the seconder maybe did not pick up on the recommendations, which needs to be looked at. But I've given a lot of leniency in the past year. What members, can I get your thoughts, please? I'll just say that I feel until in my position as the chairman that yes, I agree with everything Member McKibben has said, but I still think we're at the stage where things still have popped up. I'd hate to see, because as the impact potentially for all our 4 councils, that we could take it back. I agree that the risk is probably very low, but at this moment, I feel that maybe, if I can put it this way, a little bit of pain this year, where we've been affected in many ways in all our constituent councils, is it worth putting the risk out there? You know, and that's my thoughts, and that's why when I spoke to General Manager about it, I thought if I missed something this year to make sure everything's right going into a brand new 2021, I felt that was the best course, and that's why I was comfortable to have this recommendation put in there. But that's just my thoughts. Member Reynolds, did you?
I'm just wondering whether we, I know there's bookings or things like that, but whether we defer this decision till the November meeting, but I know it's the 13th, so it's only 3 weeks out, to make a final decision. So make a tentative booking and then make a decision to determine what the course of COVID is at that time, which I know is only a month away, but would be a good compromise. And then if it's running rampant again, then it's a wise move. If they've got it under control, and I see today all the cases were linked to existing cases, so hopefully that they can. But I really believe until there's a vaccine, we're going to have to live with this. So we may have to start to get on with normality. But just to check in case it goes rapidly out of control, I think we're better off to defer it rather than making a decision. But I think it is a good way to acknowledge the staff and also the contribution of the members to just have a small social gathering. But, so they're my views.
Members, I'm going to ask everyone. Councillor Member Reynolds, Leslie.
I like the idea of having let's call it what it is, a Christmas function. I think that's good. I thought the last one, under normal times, was very, very valuable, very, very worthwhile. People relaxed, people talked, people chatted, people sort of. I thought it was a great benefit to the morale of the whole organisation. So I'm in favour of it. I think that you can't. You may have to cancel it, but November's not going to be any. It's not going to be helpful. It might have to be cancelled the day before, or a couple of days before. So if it has to, I would recommend that you put in a clause in this recommendation that you, Mr. Chairman, have the authority to determine. After taking advice from relevant health authorities, just to proceed. or not to, and then everyone gets notified. That's the first thing, of course, and of course it's not compulsory for anyone to attend. Anyone, you know, if your partner doesn't want to come because for whatever reason, or individuals, you know, themselves feel that they're not well, in that case, of course, they'd be obliged not to come. And that, of course, I would accept that they would normally do that. I mean, I'm not saying that, I'm not even suggesting you put that in the recommendation, it's just that it's very clear that, you know, people have a moral and probably legal and ethical responsibility to be appropriate in their responses when they come. So with those few minor suggestions about how one might want to determine not to have it, I do it. If the recommend does go through, I'd recommend you change point 2 to make it 4:30, but so that at least we don't all stand up and hang around all day waiting for something that evening. But yes, I like the idea of it. If it can go ahead, I certainly would think that's a great idea, and I'd certainly like to attend.
Marie?
Just for your information, I'm chair of Lithgow Aged Care, and look, if the members want to have a Christmas party, that's fine, but I would be declining an invitation because of the potential risk to the residents of the Lithgow Aged Care. I'm in the home twice a week, and it's too much of a risk for me to take.
As we have no other members here, my suggestion to the mover and the seconder, that the wording be changed, that the determination as to whether the member Reynolds, member McKenna.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, just before we do that, could I ask, through you to the General Manager,
Yes.
or the Chief Weeds Officer, do we have any views for the staff?
I'll answer. Mr. Chairman, without giving any information away.
I don't want personal information. People.
We have more than half of our staff are in a highly vulnerable group in terms of comorbidities, and I would have to give some very serious thought as to whether I allowed them to come along, putting aside their own personal view, and that has influenced part of this position here, but I think that's probably enough.
Yep.
Yeah.
Taking the thoughts, a general comment by our General Manager then. When we discussed this, as I said, my feelings were that I still believe there's an issue out there. I've said to the members here in the past, I know I got caught up by a person from Sydney, which nearly stuffed our council up with 3 senior people. It can happen at the drop of a hat, quite easy, and I understand it and I agree with. But if for the sake of another, as Member Reynolds said, I'm happy to, with the November meeting, I think we need to make it clear by then, at the very latest. So that would require the move and the seconder to have it to determine the staging of the chairman's and financial function to be made at the November primary meeting.
I'm happy with that amendment. Second drafting of it.
Councillor Reid was the seconder on this.
How was it?
No.
No?
It wasn't. No.
Oh, I've got him next.
Sorry?
I have Councillor Reid second.
Yep.
Oh, did I? Okay, sorry.
Who was the mover, then?
Yes.
Yeah.
The only, still if the second doesn't accept it, the recommendation is, as stands in your recommendation in your papers with that extra point. It's been-
Well, I'll move an amendment.
I'll move an amendment.
Well, I can't move an amendment, someone else has to move it.
Do you want me to move an amendment? I'll move an amendment that we defer a decision on recommendation 1 and 2 until the November meeting. But we still go ahead with recommendations 3 and 4 as stated.
Oh, happy to second that.
Second that. That becomes a discussion at the moment. So is there any further discussion on this, members? I know you've said before, but this becomes a recommendation. If it doesn't get up, we go back to the original recommendation. So is there any discussion, members? Different to what's been said? I'll have to put that to a vote. All 4, now I'll just make clear that Member Reynolds is that we defer the decision on items 1 and 2 until the November ordinary meeting. So then, members, that means item 3, the scheduled remaining 20 remains, item 3 and item 4 being, what was that extra point?
The general manager contacted local councils.
General, thank
with a
you.
view to having meetings
So
there.
everyone's aware of the 4 points there in this amendment. I'll now put the vote for all 4. Against? Declare that becomes a motion.
Maybe, Mr Chairman, we should have put them as separate recommendations because Councillor Ring may have voted for 3 and 4 and not for 1 and 2.
Just voted for the amendment.
I just voted for it, it's all good.
Yeah, sorry,
There
I
has
should
been voted for amendment, which becomes a recommendation. The council,
Okay, that makes it easy.
we have a recommendation before us now. With, Mr General Manager, can you just read out those points so everyone is fully clear, because you have another chance to speak now.
The recommendation is that the council determine whether or not to stage the chairman's end of year function in 2020, and also whether or not the meeting in December starts at 2:30 until the November meeting. So those matters will be deferred, and that the schedule for the remaining 2020 council meeting dates be noted, and something to the effect of the general manager contact local councils to see whether we can use their premises for meetings in the new year.
And whether they're interested in us holding the meetings in their premises, I suppose.
So members, that is a recommendation we're now voting on. Have any members want to speak with the recommendation before us now? No? All 4? Against? Carried. Thank you, members. Item 5, week by security operations update. We have a recommendation on page 2. Could I move and second that, members? Councillor Reynolds, Councillor McKibben, and commentary members. No? Member Reynolds?
I'll go first. Thank you, Mr Chair. I was just wondering with John Holland Rail, has there been any advancements, updates or communication, as we were talking about state forest programs and also property inspections? I'll ask that first and then another question.
Mr Chairman, I'm advised by the Chief Biosecurity Weeds Officer that a couple of days ago John Holland made contact with us, and they're currently in the process of assessing the notices all to do with the Drumondra line, and they're just basically planning their work and also isolating which properties are theirs, because a large amount is, and which properties are actually privately leased and therefore they need to pass on. So that's the update on that line, and we're still trying to work out how we get back into the reassessment or re-inspection of some of the work that was done on the Great Western Line last year, which we know anecdotally that a lot has worked, some may not have, and we've got a call into John Holland, basically seeing if we can arrange another high rail inspection, because then you can do it in a day or so. We understand the concern is, can we actually do a high rail inspection with their people during the COVID situation? So that's where we're at as railways.
Could we just use, is it not possible to use drones? And I noticed that along most of the rail line there are access tracks.
Mr.
Off the
Chairman,
main rail line, I'm not talking about the disused spurs, but I'm talking about the main rail line.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, we actually did have one of our officers doing a number of inspections along that line earlier in the year, which is where we got the anecdotal evidence that there's been a lot of work done. But in practice, it turns out that there are lots of tracks in and around, but you can't systematically identify exactly where you are.
Oh, okay.
So you can do an inspection, but you're not actually sure whether you're at mile marker, whatever it is, 54 or 63. So you
Can't you do it with GPS coordinates?
Chief Fire Security Officer, or on notice to come back to us with an answer.
Oh, I thought you could do it with GPS coordinates.
Member, would you be happy if we get an answer, come back to you with an email?
Yeah,
Okay.
I just think that's the way around it. We can't do the high rail. We've got these drones. As- Whenever I travel down to the Mate Western Line, I'm surprised their access tracks all the way along it virtually. It's where you get in and get out of it. But
So with those access tracks, you're not allowed in there unless you're escorted.
right,
Into the,
that it may be easier for them to send one escort vehicle than to have to put a high rail out for us. I mean, that's only one person in one vehicle.
we'll come back.
We'll
Come back to it.
We'll come back to you with a response to all the councillors on that point.
I'm just asking, I'm no expert in sitting, no one is.
Member Reynolds?
So my second question, and I do have a third, is with regard to Carcor. I had my director of infrastructure talk to me this morning, and he expressed some concern that had been brought to his attention while there had been some weed work done in the embankment above, I believe, the railway station. I haven't seen it. He said they killed everything. He said they actually just, whoever did it, he actually asked if it was up from Macquarie. I said, no, it's not up from Macquarie. We would not be in there doing that. So whether it's a contractor or John Holland Rail, have killed the native vegetation as well as the weeds. And so there was some concern about the stability of the embankment above the Carcor station. So I'm just passing that on. As in, again, I don't know who's done what, but if the Chief Weeds Officer can maybe just do some checking to see what's taken place there, unless you're aware of what's taken place.
Councillor, can I just ask a question for you? The embankment above the railway station or from the railway station down to the village?
That's the question I asked and I was told above. But it may be worth contacting our Director of Infrastructure, Grant Baker, to just clarify concerns and maybe Brian Parker from Parks and Gardens might be.
Let's have a look at it.
Let's have a look.
We'll follow that one.
And my third question, which comes back to the reporting, Mr. Chair, and a concern that we've reduced our inspections, particularly during August, to focus on aerial spraying. Now, I know we're going to talk about aerial spraying in the workshop, but I am concerned when we're trying to, we've got a lot of directions, etc., that we've cut back in spring our inspection process. So whether the GM or the Chief Weeds Officer might be able to comment and how long we're going to continue not to be able to do it 100% would be of interest.
Mr. Chairman, and I've made that a comment in there deliberately highlighting that point. The same thing will have occurred roughly during September as well. So it's almost down to a 50% level of inspections. And the reality is that that's what happens every time we go and do something else. And the thing is that, well, we'll talk about the aerial program in more detail, but when you do something like the aerial program, you have to go back to individual property owners at least a couple of times, sometimes more, with the mapping, the consensus, the checking. It takes a lot of time, and of course it's big distances to travel as well. So each time we do an aerial program, that typically will happen, and over a year, if you do 2 programs, you'll lose a few hundred inspections you otherwise would have done. There's only 5 people.
Can I ask a question? If our council received quite a substantial fine from the Environment Protection Agency for destroying some native vegetation, so that sort of concerned me that people might think that this council is doing it. So I'm pleased to hear it's not. But should we be following that up ourselves? Or just hope that someone advises them this is a dangerous dangerous actions to be taking this sort of response, and because the EPA is quite savage to us.
Member Kimmer, I'll just get you to park 1 second. Chief Security Officer, you had a comment about the car on that or not? Any further?
Not further at this stage. We'll have to do a bit of
investigation. Okay.
That's what I would probably suggest, come back maybe to the November information.
Member McKibben?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Having been at Carco, I can't remember if it was last week or the weekend before, I actually went up to the station and thought it was a very good job had been done. However, I didn't get off the top of the embankment. I do think, and that's one of the things we've obviously, the General Manager's been very careful with in the roadside vegetation management, which is of similar nature, in that we must ensure that our contractors use all care possible to protect native vegetation, whilst at the same time we understand now that, that they have to kill the weeds, but all care must be taken, and we must show that all care has been taken in case we have someone like the EPA, but also as our duty of care and to work in the interests of the community. So we have to be very careful with this aspect. So I would ask that we look into this matter that has been raised. On the roadside weed treatment program, and I might be wrong, but I think I saw someone doing the road, some weed spraying on the Burriga Road this month. Would that have been correct? So I'm assuming the roadside program has started off already. So I thought Fred Fitzpatrick was out there with one of his chaps because he parked in my gate.
Dave, sorry for you, Chair. We haven't commenced.
Okay, so he might have been doing some private work for someone else, but I don't know. But I thought he was out there spraying roads, is what he told us.
And sorry.
You're right.
Unless he's doing work directly for the local council.
Anyway, I can ask you what was. I only saw his chap there. He works with the bloke. And I didn't speak to him. Liz spoke to him because I was putting a sheet there or something. In respect to the second, I think, and I'll raise it again in the workshop, I understand that obviously our second inspections have gone down, and that's why I was asking with our current resources whether one of the alternatives will come up in the workshop as to whether we need more resources during this spring period if we do maintain our roads, and if we do maintain our aerial spraying program, so that our current officers are able to continue with their activities. And I'm saying that's why we've got some resources. Maybe we should, especially in a year like this, be thinking of bringing a casual employee in or someone who can actually do a lot of the admin work of going to the landholders, agree the maps and all that sort of thing, if that's possible. I don't know if there's a skill base out there, etc. But I think it should be considered, and I suggest it's considered in the workshop.
So discuss it further in the workshop about it, because that would have to be a budget matter if we were looking to do that down the track.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, there'll be a quarterly budget review to November as well. I can
Maybe
have that in the back of my mind.
have that in the back of the mind. But anyway, we'll discuss it there. But all I'm saying is, I suppose we've got to do it now. We've got to approve it, but we're probably too late. We can certainly do it for the audit program.
We're back to you.
If it's decided to continue with the aerial spray program. The other thing was with my third one was with the forestry. Have we? The MOU's been done, but where are we at with it?
Mr. GM?
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, it's sort of like a hop and a jump as we go. There is an update. So at this stage, we actually haven't got an MOU formalised yet, but the forestry have indicated they're very keen to have something as applicable, the same as what we have with the local councils. And that is working together to achieve biosecurity. They do this, we do that. So that's fine, and that's sort of going ahead to be finalised. I provided a whole heap of information recently about the cost of using our contractors, the efficiencies involved, and all of those sorts of things. I got a reply yesterday from their I think I might have mentioned before, they have a new senior officer who's assigned to ensuring compliance with their weed biosecurity duties, amongst other things. So I had a contact from him, and he said, in general terms, that they agree that, they actually do agree now, that they should use our contractors on a number of roads that we're doing this year. So
look, we both did a joint exercise and we split the cost between
yes.
the road and the forest and the side of the client. That's how I put it very simply.
Yes, and in many cases that we're talking about this year, the road is theirs as well as possession. Yeah, the whole thing is theirs. They're just so they're happy with the rates. They're happy with the approach. They want some reassurance about how do they know they're going to get value for money. They're not doubting it, but they just want, in other words, how long is a piece of string? How much money do we need to do a road type thing? Because they're used to doing work of that nature on a quote per hectare or per kilometre, and we don't do it that way for good reason. That won't be a stumbling block, but I just need to explain to them before they give us the royal go-ahead. They're struggling with the concept that they are actually responsible for the whole of the road reserve that's outside the forest where there's no fence. Now, legally, there's no doubt whatsoever. I just need to explain it to them in very plain English because they obviously haven't found the part of the legislation, and they just want to be sure that they're spending their money on something they are responsible for.
For, I don't know how many, probably 1,000, maybe a couple $1,000, is it worth getting a legal opinion from Chris Nicolai and giving it to them? Then they have the legal advice, which they can put on the file to justify.
There are legal advice.
Well, no, I understand what you're saying, but there's nothing like a government. I've found government authorities, if you give them legal advice and they've got something to put on their file to justify the expenditure that they have to go to the side of the road or something like that, then that's their justification.
Yes.
Or they should get they can get their own legal advice. I agree with Councillor Leslie, but you know, we could still be sitting here 4 months' time arguing this issue out with them, whereas we could make it simple for them.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I definitely don't think we'll be sitting here in a few months' time.
Right.
And that's now, you can see, one of the reasons why I serve the general direction on them. So they know exactly what their legal responsibility is, because that tells them you have to do it, and if you don't, you're in breach and you'll be in trouble. The part of, I can't remember off the top of my head, but the schedule that relates to weeds and roadsides and waterways equally is there, and it's very plain to read. Most people who look at the Biosecurity Act don't actually recognise there's a schedule up the back that goes into, I suppose, that explanatory detail. I don't think that this is a matter of their legal people not understanding it. I think this is just the officer who's taken over this responsibility, wanting to come to terms with it clearly in his mind.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think
my only reason for suggesting, and I appreciate what Councillor was saying about cost, is that knowing public authorities, if they've got a legal advice in there that justifies it, when someone asks why you're doing this, there's a legal advice. You know what I mean?
I do.
It's a justification for them taking the action. It sounds to me the officer's not sure and he wants something to verify that he should take that action because he's not.
Well, Madam McKibben, would you be comfortable, the GM seems comfortable in his commentary that we have a relationship that could move this forward without needing that if we give the opportunity to explain under the Act and the part of the Act that this person may not understand, and we get feedback from the General Manager if he feels that we might have to go down that path. Today, we haven't had to go down that path with any other authorities, government authorities, have we? No.
And Mr. Chairman, if the direction itself is enough to compel them to do it, and if they don't, then there's actually an executive liability that applies to the General Manager of that forest district, or probably the CEO, I'm not sure which. I don't think they'll need too much.
Okay, I'm happy with that, and my fallback would be to say, if we're not getting anywhere, then to have a meeting directly with Jason And my fallback then to say is if we can't do that, throw the legal advice, you obviously get a quote first. But my concern is that we want to start this roadside, we want to start the roadside program, and part of that roadside program to be really effective this year would be good to be able to go from the side of the road right to the pine trees, and then on roads like, let me just follow this road as an example, that we spray everything there, and that's at their cost. Because I think we need it, we've been mucking around for 18 months, 2 years trying to get them to, but we're nearly there. I just hate another, especially over a season like this, which is ideal for spraying, to miss another season where we don't get them on board and we get this done effectively. I just think that, and I respect Councillor Leslie's point, but I just think a couple of $1,000 to get a legal advice to be able to throw over the fence to them would be cheap. If we can actually get that MOU signed and we can actually action it with our roadside program, rather than have it delayed out another 3 months. Because we're getting into the time when it's ideal to spray weeds. That's you
We might need to report it at our next meeting, I think.
might be doing quite well.
Yeah, well, look, I'll keep in check with the general manager where we're at with that and make sure that all the members of the Great County Council are right up to date where we're at. And if we feel that action needs to take place, I'll put a response out to all the members for feedback.
Yeah, I think we should do that as soon as possible.
Yep.
Before the next meeting.
Mr. Chairman, can I just read you something I was talking about earlier about the costs of the EPA when I said a substantial fine to the council. This was in 2011, so before my time, before Councillor Rigg's time, so just for the record, but I'll just read it. In 2011, Council, that's Lithgow Council, was fined $105,000 plus $25,000 in court costs for destroying 76 Grevillea obstriflora and fecunda plants and 1 biphidium on Port Macquarie Road in the Cavendish Valley. Both listed as endangered. So it's $105,000 fine plus $25,000 costs. So it's quite substantial. And they Lithgow Council in 2011, so they could well be on the lookout. So it's worth keeping this in mind.
It's one reason we engage contractors, because it makes them principally liable, hopefully, on us.
Yeah.
Member Ring, I'm sorry, was it a scratch of a head before I caught my eye, your hand went up? Did you put your hand up to talk?
That's all good, mate.
No, okay, sorry if I missed
No, that's fine.
Member Reynolds?
Just going back to the previous comment about funding extra resources, I'd be very happy as a member to, if it was brought forward to us, a $40,000 profit that we made last financial year, where we were supposed to go very close to a break-even budget, that we could potentially use that money this financial year to undertake work on top of that budget. If the general manager could find resources and to undertake the inspection program. But again, bring back to another council meeting, but just as a suggestion, there's potentially 40,000 there that was not budgeted for or forecast that we could,
I'd second that.
Reserves.
I'd second that now at this meeting.
I think we need to come back as a
One thing,
resolution at the next meeting.
come back and then the general manager will, I think that could be an item to discuss.
Can we, I mean, yes, I'm not sure how the discussion will go in the workshop, that's all, that will relate to this as well.
Yeah, I think that's why we.
I think if it gets discussed there, we can decide to get an item in our November meeting.
Yes,
Yeah, so there's no problem there. Okay, then no more questions, comments, discussions. Members, we have recommendations bottom of that page. All for? Against, carried. Okay, councillors, can I have a motion to go? Councillor Reynolds, Councillor McKibben, all for? Against, carried. As there's no members of the public, I'll put the motion that we go to confidential committee, all for? Against, carried. We have the door closed and recordings off, please. Lisa is,
It's recording.
okay. Put to the committee of the whole of council. Would the general manager please read the recommendations from the confidential committee?
Mr. Chairman, in relation to item 6, the recommendation adopted is that the weak biosecurity risk register report is noted.
And in the chairman's report, in the general manager's contract, that the recommendation that the general manager have a renewal of contract for a 5-year, preferred 5-year period, and then as the chairman, that any incidental matters that I can execute and renew the contract with the general manager on council's behalf. Council, can I have a motion to adopt the recommendations of the confidential committee? Member McKibben, Member Reynolds, all for? Is carried. Did you? No. Declare the meeting closed at 4:05.
Can I suggest, Mr. Chair, we have a 5-minute break for
Incidentals.
incidentals? Or I can have a coffee if we can.
Can you